When I was at Cleveland Fan Expo, one of you guys introduced me to this comic called The Antagonists, and this comic is stupidly good. And outside of like short form videos that I've seen across social media, no one's talking about this. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, right? This is not even conjecture. This is a comic they could make a show out of. Now, it is 7 issues long. I'm gonna give you guys the first issue. I did hit up Godhood Comics on Twitter, apparently they were already following me, and asked them whether or not it'd be a problem if I covered the rest. So we'll figure out what they say. But if I'm being honest with you guys, even though we're only covering the first issue, I think you guys are gonna be begging me to cover the rest by the time we get done, because this comic is phenomenal. So what this does is it opens up in Detroit, Michigan, right? And there's this whole meeting that's going on here. And any of you guys who have ever existed in any capacity in a workplace like this, you guys know exactly what's coming down the pipe. So what ends up happening, right, is this meeting kicks off and it says, first, I would like to take this time to thank you all for being here. It's been our most profitable quarter and we have all been extremely busy. It's a very important day for us all. And here at Radiant Realty Detroit, we pride ourselves on in-house promotion and development. Each of you have been responsible for the success of this fiscal year, and as you know, the board is looking for a new partner to join our ranks, someone with the grit and ingenuity to take this firm to the next level. Kevin has only been with us for 2 years, and already he's generated millions in marketing, bringing in new and innovative technologies to help us dominate the market. And the lovely Tanya Eval, our highest grossing agent this year, bringing in a whopping $10.5 million in commercial closings. Tanya's aggressive and determined nature has pushed us to close deals we've never imagined possible. My point is that this firm needs exceptional people to maintain our dominance over the Detroit market. Now, we have thought long and hard about this. It was a tough decision, but ultimately we needed to do what was best for the entire agency. No matter the outcome, you are all Radiant Realty family. So let's not beat around the bush any longer. It's my honor, and backed by the full weight of the board of directors, to announce that our new partner here at Radiant Detroit is Kevin Coleman. And at that point, Tanya is pissed. She's incensed, but she has a valid reason to be, because while Kevin's kind of making the rounds, right, and everybody's giving the applause and everybody's celebrating and all that kind of stuff, Tanya just starts walking out, right? She literally just goes to leave. Now, I will also specify here, there is some harsh language in this comic. So, I mean, like, we will bleep it out, but contextually, you'll be able to figure out what they're saying, right? Because at that point, one of the guys says, what did I tell you, right? The kid's got what it takes. And Kevin just kind of steps up, right? Yeah, and naturally, it's gonna be my first order of business to fire all you who bet against me. But when he notices Tanya leaving, he goes to approach her and he's like, Tanya, what's up, right? Are we good? No hard feelings? I mean, I know you worked hard, but so did I. And she says, I'm sure you did, Kevin. We're good, but I guess the better man won. When she goes to shake his hand, he says, well, all right, I'm so glad you did. This guy responds with the worst possible thing he could have said. He says, I've been noticing your lack of detail on a few things around here, and given my new position, I think I can finally guide you in the right direction. And she starts gripping his hand, right, with just this grip that starts crushing it. And he's like, that's one hell of a grip you've got there, Tanya. And she just says, I know, and fires her heat vision off and blows this guy's head apart, only for us to find out it's just kind of an illusion, right, a dream, like what she's imagining doing. But Tanya's got powers. Right? Here's the cool thing. Once we realize that's not actually what's going on, she just says like, oh God, Kevin, I guess sometimes I don't know my own strength, and congratulations on the promotion. Now here's where the legitimate beef starts to come into play, because it happens in 2 parts. There's this conversation here, and then there's what happens later, which is really the meat and potatoes behind this. So what ends up going on is she goes storming into her boss's office, right, John Murray, and she says, 15 years, Murray. I have given this company 15 years of my life without one promotion. Now, John responds and he says, Tanya, calm down. No need to go all Medea on me. Let's talk. Now, at the time that I was reading this comic, I was talking to Mariah and I was like, Mariah, you have to hear this. Like literally, so I start reading it to her and she's just like, Wow. But she's like, that happens, right? But he says, you know, it was the board's decision. Besides, next to me, you're the highest paid person at the firm. The promotion would only take away your commissions. But at the end of the day, she says, while at the same time, finally giving me the goddamn authority to oversee any projects I see fit. A month ago, you promised that I would be partner. And that's where he responds, right? Jesus, Tanya, have you seen the board? They're a bunch of rich white Republicans who hate women and fear black people. I backed you, but it was out of my hands. The kid could be your way in. He can change things, offer a new perspective with the board, which is an interesting way of looking at it, because the question to pose here is that, is it really giving Kevin the promotion because that's the way in order to affect change, or we're just giving her the promotion be the way to affect change? The latter is the obvious choice here, but again, there's a lot more going on than what initially seems to be happening, because what ends up going on as she responds is she says the kid has only been here for 2 years, one of which where he served as my intern. He's a idiot. And so the response to John, like, what the hell do you want from me, Eval? I gave them my recommendation and they went another direction. Big deal. It happens all the time. Maybe if you were a little more approachable around here. The way in which this is handled and the way in which she talks, I don't know how I feel about it, and I'll explain what I mean here in a second. But she responds, right, excuse me, right, don't you dare try and pull the angry black woman card on me. Why is it that I'm not allowed to be introverted at work? Why is it only a black woman's job to contribute to the culture of this office by talking to everyone cheerfully every day? You and the other men curse each other out all day, but I'm reprimanded as being unpleasant? Here's the reason why I have an issue with that. When she's this angry and she's saying things like, but I'm reprimanded as being unpleasant, it doesn't sound the way humans would organically talk in moments of passion. It almost kind of sounds like an Aaron Sorkin script. If you ever saw The West Wing, or you ever saw something like The Newsroom, right? It's not the way people normally talk. But the point is, she continues on, I've worked my ass off for you and this company. You will never know what I had to sacrifice. Now, that is a clue to the bigger picture that's going on here, because what he does is he says, don't be so dramatic. First thing tomorrow morning, I'll call an emergency board meeting. I will try my best to see if they'll reconsider and honor my recommendation to make you partner. And she asks, right, what about Kevin Coleman? And that's where he just says, he's young, he'll get over it. Now take the rest of the day off and try and get some rest before Calvin and the kids get home, because here's where the waters get murky. So what ends up happening is Tanya goes to basically the lunchroom, right, in the building. And a couple of girls walk in having a conversation with each other. And one of the girls says, Nicole from accounting said that Allison over at JH Financials on the 40th floor was banging the janitor and the CEO. Now that's what I call from top to bottom. And she says, word travels fast around here, but it just so happens that I'm faster. And so one of the girls asks, right, hey, doesn't she work with you at Radiant? Because we're talking about a singular building occupied by multiple companies. And that's where the blonde-headed girl says she totally does. And I don't want the poor thing to hear you. And so basically they're gossiping, right? So the dark-haired girl says, really, unless she's one of those super-powered freaks and has super hearing, I think we're okay. And so the blonde girl says, you know, I feel so sorry for her. And the dark-haired girl asks why, and the blonde-haired girl says, but as Mr. Murray's secretary, I fax all his paperwork and all of his important documents. I overheard him on the phone the other day saying she was better off not being promoted, but having the illusion that she could be, that he said he needed her right where she was to do his job more efficiently. And that's where one of the girls is like, that is And so when Tanya overhears this, she's incensed. She smashes the coffee pot. And then at that point, she goes and confronts John. And here's where things go nuts, because when this guy's walking out to his car at the end of the workday, Tanya comes running up on him and just shouts, Murray, and scares the crap out of this guy, which makes perfect sense. I mean, somebody comes running up on you in a parking garage and you're an old man, you're gonna get a little freaked out. I mean, I'm 42 and I'm gonna get a little freaked out. But he turns around and realizes who it is, right? And he says, Tanya, you scared the shit out of me. What are you still doing here? I thought you left ages ago. And she says, you lied to me, Murray. And he asks, right, like, what is this all about, right? What are you going on about now? And she says, you never sent in my recommendation. And I wanna hear you say it. I wanna hear you say that you lied. And he says, you know, I thought that we were past this, right? He tries to dismiss it, right? You know, I told you I backed you. And she says, don't fucking lie to me. Tell me. I want to hear you say it. And his response, fine. And this is where you find out what's really going on here. She's been screwed over, right? He says, you want the truth? Here it is. You're good, Tanya. You're really good. But you do not have what it takes to be a member of the board. But under me, look at all you've accomplished. You belong right where you are, right by my side. And she says, more like under your heel, all these years of saving your ass, I should have known. The millions that you funneled. So he's been embezzling money from the company. Tax evasion to offshore accounts. I've covered you for my entire career. And he tells her, I did what was best for you. Your ambitions were too high. How far did you really think you could go without me? You should have been thanking me. I've made you millions. Your house, your car, those expensive pantsuits. For crying out loud, your husband works in education. All you have is because of me. And she says, I have to hand it to you, Murray. You played me. I don't blame you though. It's human nature to try and get over each other, to on everyone else on our way to the top. And at that point, she starts levitating, right? And she says, trust me, I've spent my whole life trying to prove that point, trying to prove that deep down, we're all just as bad as you. You did make one grave mistake though. You didn't know who you were with. And she incinerates his car with her heat vision. At that point, the guy starts begging for his life, right? And she says, I told you, you had no idea what I've sacrificed, no idea what I used to be. And she says, do not leave now, Murray. I'm just getting warmed up. And at that point, this guy, being as terrified as he is, she incinerates him on the spot with her heat vision. She kills her boss. Right? And that's a crazy thing, because then we get this amazing monologue, right? Which brings in a lot of moral political philosophy here, right? Where it says, don't you dare judge me. I can feel it now. I cannot read minds like my husband, but I know what you're thinking, because we'll talk about her husband here in a second. She says, she just killed her boss. This must be the villain of the story. She must be evil. But Webster's dictionary defines evil as profoundly immoral and wicked. I think it's more of a relative term. Tyrannical systems are often created by people who believe that they have the highest and noblest intentions. Totalitarian countries, theocratic dictatorships, and abusive cults are all typically founded and promoted by those who are convinced that their actions will benefit humankind. Here is a pertinent adage about self-deception and fallibility. It's who we all are, sinners, playing saint, monsters, acting as men. This is where the political philosophy comes into play, right? Intentionalism versus consequentialism, right? Deontological ethics, and act as moral if and only if everybody can do it. How do you determine what's right and wrong? How do you determine what's fair and not fair? Because that's what she's kind of pointing out here. She says, Murray was a pig. He'd been married for 30 years, and yet every Friday after work, he would take thousands of dollars from the firm, have his secretary cook the books, and head down to the Motel 6, where he'd find the youngest woman of the night that he could find. His wife would not see him again until Sunday morning at church. Was Mr. Murray evil? Does my evil outrank his? Have you ever thought about killing the man who cut you off in traffic, or hurting your annoying neighbor or overzealous ex? I have found that our worst impulses innately make us evil. Even if you don't act on those thoughts, it's human nature to vile and to think you're not. Why is it not evil when an American soldier raids a village in Palestine and murders women and children? Why is the country divided on whether it's evil for a trained cop to shoot an unarmed black citizen? I learned early on that the line between good and evil was damn near invisible. My father died before I was born, and my stepfather used my mother and me as retribution targets for his failures. During one of his drunken tirades, my mother killed him to save me. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. That's when I knew just how broad the term evil was, and how ineffective the word good had become. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, but after today, I don't think intentions matter. And so at this point, she has to contend about what she's going to do when her husband finds out. Because at that point, we switch over to him. And honestly, her husband's really, really cool. So at that point, you switch over to Jackson Heights High School. And I should probably qualify that statement. Her husband's cool, but insofar as he's like a blend between like Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince and a guy who's basically just a stern dick. And you'll see what I mean as you get through this, because Calvin is the principal of Jackson Heights High School. And that's where he's told by his assistant, your daughter is here as you requested. And he says, thank you, Miss Gray, send her in. And one of the things Miss Gray says, right? Like, my feet are killing me, but man, looking at Calvin makes it all worth it. So she's got the hots for this man. But at that point, when his daughter walks in, he closes the door with his telekinesis. Not only that, he's also got telepathy because he mentally tells her to sit down. And so at that point he says, have we not discussed the importance of staying out of trouble and keeping a low profile? And she asks, right, can you please stay out of my head and talk to me like normal? I hate it when you do that, right? And she says, and maybe don't stand there like some Middle Eastern dictator. The whole school mocks you for it, right? And so that's when he just respects her wishes and starts talking to her, right, as a normal person. And he says, unlike you, I am less inclined to care about what a bunch of pathetic teenagers think. This is the third time you've come to my office this month. Explain yourself, Aaliyah, because he holds out a piece of paper and says, look at this infraction, use of vulgar language, skipping class, disrespect, what is going on? So right off the bat, we can tell he's a very stern man, right? He's a very by the book man. I doubt this dude has ever smiled once in his entire life. I mean, obviously this is sarcasm, but still, right? She asks, all of a sudden, you can't read minds, which is kind of weird because she just asked him not to. The life of teenagers, right? Teenagers will ask you not to do something and then get mad at you for not doing it. But that's the thing, she says, it's not easy being the principal's daughter. On one end, teachers have higher expectations for me, and on the other end, students think I'm getting some kind of special treatment, not to mention you walking around campus like some prison warden. And that's where he tells her, right, I know it's been tough. I remember what it was like having your grandmother as my teacher. And where initially she says, then you of all people should understand what I'm going through, his response, I know you're growing up and life is not going to get any easier, especially not for you, a young black woman with superpowers. It's almost like you were set up to fail, baby girl, and that's what the world wants for people like us. We do not have the luxury of second chances. It's unfortunate, but it's surreal. You need to find another way to deal with your problems instead of acting out. And that's where she's like, is that it? Right? That's all you have to say? I'm off the hook, no punishment or any more of that old black rhetoric? And he just says, don't be ridiculous. We will finish this conversation at home. For now, you will go to class and be on your best behavior. And he says, when the bell rings at the end of the day, you will get on the bus and you will go straight home. And she's like, no, right? Like there's a game tonight. It's the first game of the season, right? Which, I mean, let's all remember what it was like being a teenager. It's the end of the world. That's what it feels like when you're that young. So for her, it's the biggest thing because this is her entire world. It means something to her. And that's why the punishment is so harsh, because her father says that is a game that you will not be attending. Behavioral policy and standards apply to all of Jackson Heights athletes, including you. And that's where she says, that's not fair, right? I worked hard to make the cheerleading team, and a lot of the other girls don't even think I deserve to be there. And he says, you need to get out of the habit of comparing yourself to these people. You are different and you are better. There'll be more games, so go back to class. And so he tells her, stop groveling. You should never have to prove anything. You have done this to yourself. And so that's where she ends up like storming out, right? And he's like, hey, at least you're not getting any special treatment. And so that's where you switch over to Tanya when she gets back home. And she just says, I don't know what I was thinking. Before tonight, I hadn't killed a man in 20 years. And she says, I don't know what I'm going to tell my husband. And so as soon as she walks to the door, a laser beam comes flying through and almost hits her in the head. And that's when you meet her youngest son, right? He's like, look, so I've developed a new pulsar cannon to basically take care of the ant problem that we have in the backyard. It attracts potential proton molecules and converts them into kinetic ones. I thought the safety was on the gun. My bad. But the funny thing is he realizes she's not screaming at him. And so at that point, he flees. He's like, we gotta get out of here, right? Like, mom's not yelling at me. But it's also a funny thing because once she gets in and her husband's, you know, kind of winding down for the night and all that kind of good stuff, she tells him we need to talk. And then Aaliyah walks in saying the worst possible thing she could. She's on the phone with her friend talking about how fine another guy is. Now, here's the thing. When you are a dad, and I know this firsthand because my dad and my sister went through it, when you're a dad and your daughter comes walking in when she's at that age, 15, 16, 17 years old, talking about how cute boys are, oh, it's gotta be some kind of a worst case scenario. Dads never wanna have to deal with that, right? Dads never wanna have to contend with that. I am actually terrified of that myself. But the point is, she's not supposed to be on the phone. She doesn't know it, but she's not supposed to be. And in fact, that's what her dad says. You're grounded. Get off the phone and leave it on the counter. And that's where she's just like, that's not part of my punishment, right? We never agreed to that. And her father's just kind of like, yeah, I know, but it should have been, right? So you don't get to act out and then go about your day as normal. Now, Aaliyah looks to her mom. She looks to Tanya for some kind of help. And Tanya's just like, no, right? Don't look at me. I just live here. Listen to your father, Aaliyah. By now, you should know the deal. So she takes her phone, slams it down on the countertop, and her dad's like, we can make it 2 weeks, smart ass. Right? It's amazing. I will say, this is one of the things I love about this comic, right? One of the things I love about the antagonist is the interpersonal dynamics, how they relate to one another, right? This is one of the things that defines comics in this way, small little moments between characters and how they relate to each other. And so where Calvin fills Tanya in on everything that had gone on with Aaliyah getting into trouble, acting out, different things like that, Tanya initially goes to tell him, we need to talk about something that I've done at work, but she asks about where their son Trey is. And that's where Calvin's like, you mean the only one of our children with some damn sense? And he said that one of his college classes ran late, and so I'm sure he's buried deep in some book at the library, which he's not. Their son Trey is part of a fight club, which is kind of amazing, to be honest, because he's got powers too. Because what goes on here is that in this whole thing, and this is one of those weird, wonky conversational topics that I'm talking about, is that one of the guys says, right, like they say that you can't be hurt. Come, let us see. That's a little weird, right? I mean, you would expect him to say something like, let's find out, right? Whatever the case is. So small little moments like that, right? Kind of throw me out a little bit, but it doesn't really make any difference. This guy cold cocks Trey and knocks him out in like 2 hits, but with this giant welt on his face, it starts to heal. And that's one of his powers, right? He has the ability to heal. And that's where the statements made by Tanya, right? Kind of a monologue here. For years, my husband and I have tried to keep our children safe from the world and safe from us. Yes, there's a misspelling there. Who cares? And she says, and for a time, we did just that. And that's where Trey stands back up and is like, my turn, and just clocks this guy. And she says, we taught them to be normal, to hide their abilities, and to blend in. And so that's when you switch over to the aftermath of Murray being killed. And here's the crazy thing. These 2 detectives who show up, this is clearly Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt from Seven. There's no way it's not. I mean, look at this picture of Brad Pitt from Seven, and look at this picture of Morgan Freeman from Seven. Tell me that's not who these guys are modeled on. You'll never convince me otherwise. 100% they are. And we're told these guys are Detectives Spooner and Carton, and we're actually told that here in a second, but these guys are looking on, right? And it's like, man, this guy didn't even know the gas cap was on, right? Didn't think it would be his last smoke. So clearly what Tanya's done here, she made it look like an accident, right? But that's where the feds show up here, because they're told this is Agent Sheila English of the FBI. She'll be taking over this crime scene. Make sure she gets what she needs. But then Agent Sheila is told, these are Detectives Spooner and Carton. They might not look like it, but they are very good at what they do. And so that's where the question's asked, right? Like, why in the world would the feds have any interest in a car accident like this? And that's where they're told, because this was not an accident. It was something else. Someone did this. And that's where Tanya picks back up and says, but tonight showed me that the reality is no matter how hard we try, we are far from normal. And in trying to protect our kids, I may have just put them at risk. I may have just ruined our lives. God help me, and God help us all. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this to an end. I told you guys, this is the first issue. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.